right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sustainable Leadership breakout session. My name is Bianca Lobo. I'm from Rotaract in Australia. I'm current immediate past chair of the Rotaract Australia MDIO. I've had a few leadership positions within Rotaract since 2010, I think is when I first joined the club. I'm here with Ada Gain, and I'll let Ada introduce herself as well.
Hi everyone, so I'm Ada. I'm the current chair for the Rotaract Australia Multi-District Information Organisation. Prior to being the chair, I was also DRR for one of the districts in Australia, and I was the inaugural president of one of the clubs that chartered here as well.
Excellent, and we're very happy to be able to be sharing our experience with you. Ada and I have both obviously been involved with Rotaract in leadership roles for a while, and we want to share some of our experience being on the Rotaract Australia MDIO and working with DRRs for a few years, because we found that DRRs have continuously struggled with a few similar challenges, and these really were keeping clubs and members engaged, growing Rotaract and maintaining the quality of Rotaract impact. So the topic we're covering today covers an approach to leadership in Rotaract that will focus on these areas by looking at a strategic model. And we believe that it falls under this concept and this model of sustainable leadership. And what we'll see is that we've got a definition of sustainability here. And for us, sustainable leadership is being able to maintain leadership at a certain level. So this, of course, involves management of yourself as a leader, along with the team that you're working with. And we'll dive into what that means a little bit later. But first of all, what are we trying to get out of this today? So we want to help you as Rotaract leaders understand the different things that are involved in leading your clubs to maintain that sustainable success. When we were going to run this face-to-face, we were going to give you an opportunity to discuss what that meant for your club and district and for your MDIO team. But instead, we'll give you a chance to reflect on what this means for you. And hopefully it means you can take that back to have group discussions with your team later on. And we also will give you some resources that will help with those discussions that you have with your teams as well. So getting into it. So to start off with, we'll talk about culture, and it does tie in. So the model that we're using today is based on research from Avery and Bergsteiner. So they focus on culture here, and the areas that I mentioned before that we struggle with as Rotaractors can really be covered under the concept of culture. So again, your club culture, your district culture, and your MDIO culture. The research talks about two strong leadership philosophies that lead to a culture, and I'm going to go through them a little bit. So the locus culture is, the locus philosophy is essentially describes when teams are drained of energy continuously, and this leads to a culture where things are being taken from the team essentially over and over and over. And this leads to burnout, leads to disengagement, and then obviously you lose people from your team. And the symbolism of the locust is there because locusts form into an area, they devastate and take all the resources from the area and leave it bare. And the honeybee philosophy, obviously the opposite, is describing the leadership philosophy where people are nurtured and there is a healthy give and take relationship. So what you'd see in teams with this philosophy are team members that are empowered, that are engaged, that are growing themselves as individuals, but are also growing their team as well. So take a second to reflect. What's your long-term goal as a leader? Do you understand how this works for you? And which type of culture does your club have? And culture is a bit of a mix of leadership and history. So it's worthwhile also thinking about the last few years of your club, which leadership philosophy was used then, and how does that led to your culture now. All right. So obviously we're going to be talking about the honeybee leadership philosophy and how you really get that honeybee mentality going. So the model that we're going to be using is called the Sustainable Leadership Pyramid. Now, the model itself is quite complex. So I've got this slide first to just be able to describe what you're going to be looking at on the next slide. And what you're going to see here is obviously the aim, or the top out there, is going to be sustainability or sustainable leadership. And then under that, you've got how you can measure the success to make sure you're getting to that aim, that sustainability. The high level practices are the things that we generally would stop on if we were looking at improving our club, and I'll explain what that means next. And the foundational practices are, the more operational things, the things linked to tasks, the things that you have to do, week to week to make your club move and happen. So that's what you're going to be looking at next. Now, obviously, the sustainable leadership pyramid that we're going to be looking at is not our model, and we're taking a different interpretation by interpreting it in the way that makes sense to Rotaract. So what you would read in the literature would be different to how I'm going to be explaining it, but we're making sense for our current context. That's what we're going to be, that's how we're going to be interpreting it for you. All right, so here is the pyramid. Like I said, there's a lot going on, but I will take you through it. And the way I'll take you through it is bottom to top. So starting down at the bottom, on that foundational level where it's making it all happen, this is all about your processes. So and we'll use the highlighted sections there in big. What processes do you have around your long-term retention of your members? What's keeping them staying in your club? So, are you asking them what they're wanting to be involved in? Are you making sure that you're linking up with individual members? What are you doing for internal succession planning? Do you have a practice of tapping people on the shoulder, making sure that your vice president becomes your president, mentoring within the club? What's happening in that area? And then what are you doing to value people? Are you acknowledging them, when they're contributing? Are you making sure that they're being heard? So, these foundational areas here, it's where it all happens. But that then links into your key values and behaviors as a club. So this is really in some ways the areas that people stop at, and I know that I've stopped at when I've been leading my club in the past. It's the areas that you think of when you want to be changing your club. And so your foundational practices affect these key values and behaviors, obviously. And what you want to be seeing is you do want to see that effect happening. But you also want to be going further, because while this tier is obviously important, what it's missing is the strategic and structured approach with the top two tiers provide. So that second from the top tier, the drivers, this is how you measure success. And you need to be able to track your progress, because that's what gives you insightful information about your current status, and helps you then to adjust to know where you're going. So without this, you really are navigating in the dark a little bit. You think you might be doing the right thing, but you don't actually know where people are at, what's important. So for example, by measuring the staff engagement through, say, an annual survey, it could be as simple as that for your team. Are we doing what you're interested in as a club? Do you feel like you're contributing as a club member? You get that kind of information. It gives you a little bit of an understanding about whether people are managing themselves properly and are not feeling too burnt out. It gives you an understanding of how the team's oriented, and how that balance is going as a team as well. So you can see already how those key values and behaviors are more meaningful after you have the driver information. And then finally, you get to your aim. So again, this is strategic. You need to know this is where you're going, because it gives you the motivation, but it also helps you with that long-term thinking. Even if it's a year, we sometimes in Rotaract get caught up in the next month or the next week or the next 2-3 months, but we forget the year, 2 years ahead. We forget to think far enough to understand how what we're doing now is going to impact the club or whatever team you're in on that long-term basis. So making sure that you keep that aim of sustainability at the top of your mind will help motivate you and drive you through all of these layers to get to the outcome you're looking for. Now, there is obviously there are a lot of areas on this slide. And you'll see in the workbooks, we do try to recommend that you choose the values and the behaviors that matter the most to you, and then you can focus the foundational practices on them, and you can focus the drivers and your measurement on them too. So for your club, what's most important? And we hope you can take that question back to your clubs and your teams and have a bit of a discussion about which areas you're going to be focusing on, and then how you're going to work and plan through those layers to get to that strategic outcome. But as we know, we don't have time to go all through all of those areas for you today, but the one we wanted to focus on was really important, being self-management. Because if you as a leader are not looking after yourself, then it's going to be very hard for you to look after your team as well. So I'll now hand over to Ada.
Thanks, B. So as Bee's just mentioned, we are really focused, we're both very passionate about Rotaract, and we're very focused on retention within Rotaract. So often what that means is, how does Rotaract sit for you, and what sort of things are you doing at the moment to take care of yourself? And so if we move on to the next slide, we're going to be looking at the I in leadership, because we don't believe that you can effectively lead your team if you're not okay. So this segment's really about putting on your own oxygen mask first before being able to assist others in that space. And if we move on to the next slide, I just wanted to outline that this is really important. There's plenty of research on this area, and it shows that people with higher levels of well-being are more resistant to things like cold and flus. They feel more connected to others. They actually live up to 7 years longer. They're also more creative, and they're better at problem solving and making their work more effective as well. So you can see from this little graph that we've got here, often we move up and down depending on sort of what's going on for us in our lives at the time, but we want to try and put some strategies in place for you guys so that you're sitting more in the thriving space more frequently. It's okay to be going up and down a little bit, but we want to put some things in place so that you can sort of feel a bit more like you're managing and you're coping okay, and that Rotaract's more sustainable for you long term as well. 60% of our well-being is made up of our genes, life circumstances and upbringing, but 40% is actually actions, how we choose to spend our time and our attitude to life. So how we think and we feel is just as important as good food and exercise to having a long and happy life. Let's start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this theory indicates humans are compelled to fulfill their base needs before the high levels can be effectively met. So if you have a look here at the pyramid we've got on screen, we've got our basic physiological needs, moving up to safety, love and belonging, esteem, and then self-actualization. So for example, if you're trying to utilize your creativity and problem-solving skills, which are right up there in the top of the pyramid in the self-actualization area, but you're not feeling safe, or if you're starving, you're going to need to meet those needs first. So before we can be effectively problem solving for what's going on in our clubs and our projects, we need to make sure that we're actually taking good care of ourselves first and meeting those other basic needs. So how do we do that? Well, we need to assess and we need to plan. So in the same way we might assess our clubs and plan for the year, we need to spend the time and prioritise doing this for ourselves. And I think unfortunately it's something that we as helpers and volunteers have a tendency to actually forget to do. So we're going to have a little activity to get you all started. So on the next slide, we've got the self-care domains and what sort of things can you be doing for yourself. So you can either do this on a piece of paper or if you're on your laptops or your computers, you can be doing it on this. So open up a blank page, draw a little circle in the middle, putting yourself at the center, and then having a big circle around the outside. Divide the big circle then into 6 segments. On the outside of the circle, around the segments, you're going to label them. So we're going to have a physical segment, we're going to have psychological, we're going to have spiritual, we're going to have personal, professional, and emotional. Each of those domains, I want you to start having a bit of a think about the activities that you're already doing to take care of yourself. For example, in the physical domain, you might be looking at things like exercise, eating a balanced diet. You might be going to your doctor for regular health checkups. It might be things like brushing your teeth twice a day. It might be taking time off when you need to. It might be getting good quality sleep. It might be playing sports. Then if we were to move on to the psychological domain, we might be looking at things like journaling, self-reflection, might be paying attention to what's going on in your inner experience, and might be also saying no to extra responsibilities. You know, is your plate already too full? Is it possible for you to actually manage that extra project, or do you need to say no to that one so you can finish off some of the things that you've already got going on? Psychological might also mean you might need to get support or help with certain conflict. So often conflict can be playing at the back of our minds for a long period of time. If you've got a conflict that's going on at the moment, reach out and get some support with that. So you can ask your other Rotaractors for assistance, or it might be reaching out to a close Rotarian that you feel comfortable with to help you manage that conflict. Looking at the spiritual domain, it might be things like spending time outside. It might be finding a spiritual connection or community. It might be being open to learning and not being the expert, or it might be things like reading inspirational literature, whatever works for you to meet those spiritual needs. The next domain being personal. Personal, you might be looking at things like making plans for yourself, outlining your goals, or making a vision board. It might be creating a space that you feel safe and comfortable in. It could be cooking or baking. It could be learning a new instrument, or it might be fostering friendships. In the professional segment, you might be looking at things like taking time for your breaks, sitting and eating your lunch mindfully. It might be getting regular supervision or support from your manager. It might be taking mental health days, or taking your vacation leave. Or it might be even exploring what your work goals are. Are you meeting those goals? Are you putting steps in place to get there, to get where you want to be professionally? And then if we look at the emotional domain, we might be looking at things like, you know, are you practicing gratitude? Are you listing 3 things that you're grateful for each day? Are you practicing forgiveness? It might be things like watching a funny movie. You might be exploring somewhere new, or listening to some music to uplift your mood, or buying yourself a gift, or it might even be things like cuddling your pet. If you are struggling to think of things that you're doing in certain domains, then give yourself some space to reflect on what you can be doing to look after yourself. And then last but not least, we're going to go back and have another look to succession planning. So this is what a self-care wheel might look like on the previous slide. That might be some of the domains you're looking at, just to give you guys a bit of a picture of what it can look like. And then on the next one, we've got succession planning. So this also allows you to develop in other areas. It helps you to learn new things, provide support to new and emerging leaders as well. So succession planning is a process for identifying and developing new leaders. Most clubs hold each leadership position for a period of 1 year. This means succession planning should be at the forefront of everyone's mind. Succession planning increases the availability of experienced and capable volunteers that are prepared to assume these roles as they become available, or to step in when necessary during periods of transition. Succession planning also embeds leadership development as a core organisational system, rather than as an ad hoc process so the organisation is ready for inevitable change. This actually will help you with your self-care, and this will help you with Rotaract retention. It means that not all the pressure is placed on you as the leader, but in fact is spread across the entirety of the team, and actually makes them feel like they're valued and part of the process as well. So succession planning is really, really important. So just to summarize really quickly, we've touched on the honeybees and the locusts and looking after yourself and looking after your team. This is just about getting you started thinking about your clubs, the culture you want to foster, and making sure your Rotaract journey is a sustainable one. Included in this presentation is a workbook to get you continuing on your journey. But if you have any questions in the meantime, you're welcome to contact myself or Bianca, and there's our email addresses, and we'll be sending out the workbooks as well, so you can get started on the rest of that. So from Bianca and I just wanted to thank you all for your time.
Great, thank you. And